Do you want me to bring it around? You want me to set it up over here? Over there? Over here?
Got the battery replaced. So is anybody familiar with the attitude or the feeling that one has when their enemies are being punished? Maybe you remember being a child and having this feeling as your sibling is being whooped or punished, something like that. Maybe you have children. Yeah, they had it coming, right? Maybe you have children and you're seeing this daily, where one is watching another one's being punished and just thinking, having that attitude. Yeah, that's good. I like that. It's a very arrogant attitude to have if you think about it. The child is probably guilty of doing that exact same thing that the other child's being punished for, or that child is going to do that same thing tomorrow. So very arrogant of them to have that attitude, first of all. Well, yeah, that's the idea of it. And the arrogance is in thinking that you're not going to get what they're getting, right? So, yeah, what goes around comes around, right? Well, we're going to be studying this attitude with Philistia in Isaiah chapter 14 toward the end there, starting in verses 28 and following. But before we do that, we have our memory work. Who is saying, surely as I have thought, so shall it come to pass, and as I have purposed, so shall it stand? Who's saying that? The Lord of hosts, right? The Lord, indicating sovereignty, the absolute sovereign. None is above him. The Lord of hosts, he is powerful. He has, as Isaiah describes him, he has the power to do what he says he's going to do. And I gave it away. The Lord of hosts has sworn. The Lord of hosts hath sworn. That word hath sworn, I wonder if somebody could read for us Hebrews chapter 6 and verses, let's see, let me get there and I'll figure it out. Hebrews chapter 6. See, Hebrews chapter 6, verses 12 through 19. 12 through 19 of Hebrews chapter 6.
So that you may not be slaves, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promise. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, surely I will bless you and multiply you. Thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and all their disputes and oaths final for confirmation. So when God desired to show no more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have as this a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain.
All right, thank you, brother. So God promised Abraham. Abraham had to recognize something, and that is that our God, when he makes a promise, he keeps that promise, right? When our Lord, when Isaiah says, the Lord of hosts hath sworn, he's going to keep it. He's not going to forget about it as men do when they say they're going to do something and they forget to do it, whether that's convenient for them or not. Men typically does that, but God doesn't do that. If God says, surely as I have thought, so shall it come to pass. What I'm saying to you, Babylon, what I'm saying, if I say that you're going to fall due to your pride, that's what's going to happen. If I say to you, Assyria, that you are going to fall, that's what's going to happen. And this evening, if I say to you, Philistia, that you are going to fall as well, that will certainly happen. What God has sworn, and we've discussed this in, let's see, the fall of human pride with Babylon, the fall of Assyria, Isaiah's prophecy of that shows us God's sovereignty over empires. Nothing Assyria could do could cause God to fail his oath, right? Today we look to nations as powerful. We could see a nation that launches surface-to-air or surface-to-surface missiles as powerful. We could fear them. We could trust in them if we are part of that nation. We could be a part of a nation that has B-2 bombers that can drop bunker buster bombs and take out facilities underneath the ground. And we could look at that and trust in the nation we're in. That nation can't do anything against God, can they? B-2 bombers? None of these things can. So our God has communicated his sovereignty over all empires, over everything on this earth. We're also going to see Philistia and how their gloating over the judgment of others was not something that pleased God, and it was something that one of the things that they were judged for. And tied to this, I wanted to have both of these in the same night because they're so closely related. Philistia is gloating over the judgment of others, but when we read about Moab, we read about God's compassion in judgment. Is the parent who is punishing their child, is that something they gloat over? Is it something they take pleasure in? No. So why does the other child take pleasure in it? Right? I thought we got the laughs out of the way. You might have come in late. I'm sorry. So I'm just kidding. But you've got a father who is loving and compassionate, even in judgment, and yet you have others that gloat over that same judgment, that same punishment. And we are human. We do the same today. We'll talk about that. And that's why I wanted both of those in the same lesson this evening. So Philistia, gloating over others' punishment is the theme we're looking at with Philistia. I wonder if someone could read for us chapter 14 and verses 28 through 32, please.
This is the burden which came in the year that King Ahaz died. Do not rejoice, all of you Philistia, because the rod that struck you is broken. For out of the serpent's roots will come forth a viper, and its offspring will be a fiery flying serpent. The firstborn of the poor will feed, and the needy will lie down in safety. I will kill your rich with famine, and it will slay your remnant. Wail, O gate, cry, O city, all you of Philistia are dissolved. For smoke will come from the north, and no one will be alone in his appointed times. What will they answer the messengers of the nation? The Lord has founded Zion, and the poor of his people shall take refuge in it.
All right, thank you very much. So Philistia is being, did your translation say Philistia? All right, the King James has Palestina. Rejoice not thou whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. So Philistia, Palestina, the Hebrew word, I think it's on this page here. The Hebrew word is Pelesheth. And it's here, and that word in Hebrew means migratory. It means rolling. You know, ever heard the song, Papa Was a Rolling Stone? It's about a man that never settled down, right? Philistia was rolling. These were a nomadic group of people, a seafaring people, and we all recognize the name Philistines, right? We have many who are Philistines, a great enemy to the people of Israel in the past. And so what is Philistia in Isaiah's day? It's not much different. You have a group of city-states that makes up Philistia. It's not a proper nation. It's a group of city-states, independent city-states that sort of band together, if that makes sense. And you'll recognize some of these. I see the file didn't really work here, but Gath, Elon, who is from Gath? Anybody who's the popular guy from Gath? Goliath, right. So Goliath, who you'll recognize as the giant Philistine, he was from Gath. You have Elon, Ashdod, very familiar names, Ashkelon, and Gaza, these main city-states of Philistia. Now, we tend to use the word, as the King James has, Palestina here. And the reason for that is in 135, you have Emperor Hadrian, the emperor of Rome at the time. He did not like the Jews, as many of them did not like the Jews. And so to suppress the Jews' identity with this region here, you have Jerusalem here, just for your reference, Dead Sea over here, because he wanted to, divorce the Jewish identification of this region with who they were. Hadrian went back and used the term that the Romans would use for the Philistines back then. So think about that. He's renaming a land after your worst enemy. He's renaming your neighboring land after your worst enemy because he doesn't like you. That's some shade he's throwing there. So Philistia, Palestina, Palestine we call it today. In history has not been a very cohesive identity as a culture, which is strange because you have people out protesting today that would very much disagree with that statement. There's not a historian among them. They have no idea. The Palestine was an invention by a Roman emperor, that name, and they keep it for that region today. That's why the King James uses it. It's because they were familiar with it, just as they are familiar with other things that are misnamed, like Easter. When Easter occurs in the King James, they're familiar with the time of year, so they use it for that time of year. So none of that has anything to do with our lesson, just a brief bit of history for you in what we're talking about. So we're talking about Philistia, a coastal nation, modern-day Gaza, as we call it today, and a frequent enemy of Israel, we'll remember, from the Old Testament. You have, just as we've mentioned, Goliath in 1 Samuel 17. The prophecy that we just read, as Gail mentioned or read there, it occurs after King Ahaz's death. So he says there, in the year that King Ahaz died, was this, what's he describe it as? In the year that we're in verse 28, in the year that King Ahaz died was this burden. So it's a burden. Who's it a burden to? We know what a burden is. It's a heavy weight, right? Who's going to find this message heavy? Two people. Philistia is going to find it heavy, right? And then elsewhere in the prophets, we constantly hear of the message being described as the burden of blank, the burden of that prophet. Why is that? It's hard to hear, right? You have to deliver something that is hard to hear. And it's hard to deliver bad news if you love the person who's receiving that bad news. Not so with Philistia. They saw Judah, looking here at verse 29, rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. Who is that rod? We'll put it into context. Ahaz has just died. The king of Judah has just died. And so who's rejoicing? Philistia is. So that's the context of the verse we're looking at here. So this would occur around 715 BC. And Philistia would see instability occurring. And it may have seen this as an opportunity to assert themselves in worldly affairs. So Philistia here is likely rejoicing because of Ahaz, because of the instability that is brought upon Judah. So we understand that long rivalry between Philistia and Judah, and can understand from a worldly perspective and maybe our children's perspectives why they would be happy about the punishment of Judah. So Philistia made a few mistakes here. Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, verse 29, because of the rod of him that smote thee is broken, for out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice. Anybody have a different word for that in verse 29? Leviathan? Viper, right. So it's a snake here. The Hebrew Shepha refers to a venomous serpent, symbolizing a dangerous and unexpected judgment for Philistia. So here they're rejoicing over Judah's weakened state. That's the rod that is broken. And God warns that a greater threat, which would possibly be Assyria or some other Jew, because Judah's not done for right now. They've got some strong kings coming up that may arise against them. God is warning them of judgment, that they are probably going to face an even greater threat than they're rejoicing of Judah facing at that moment. Proverb 24:17 says, rejoice not when thine enemy falleth, and let not thine heart be glad when he stumbleth. It's very human to feel that way, isn't it? When one who opposes us, one who has wronged us, when we see them fall into misfortune or difficulty, it's very human to enjoy that, isn't it? It's something we got to train ourselves out of.
And the next verse after that, bless the Lord see it, and it displeased him, and he turned his wrath away from them.
Right, absolutely. There is mercy coming for Judah, and we'll see that. The firstborn of the poor, in verse 30, the firstborn of the poor shall feed, and the needy shall lie down in safety. And I will kill thy root with famine, and he shall slay thy remnant. God here promises provision for the humble and the needy while bringing judgment on Philistia. James 4 and verse 6, another reference we can look at. God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace to the humble. Philistia stands proud. Philistia is not humble. We look forward to verses 31 and 32. Howl, O gates, cry, O city, thou whole Palestina art dissolved. For there shall come from the north a smoke, and none shall be alone in his appointed times. What shall one answer then, the messengers of the nation, that the Lord hath founded Zion, and the poor of his people shall trust in it? So Jerusalem's sort of, if I got it right, they're off to the northeast. So maybe he's talking about Assyria, we don't know. I meant to advance the slide here. So the theme of this being the humility and the caution one ought to have in response to others' downfall here. Rejoicing in others' judgment, it reflects that we are proud of our own state, or at least arrogant of our own state, and it also invites judgment upon us. So we should always use the failures of others as a mirror instead of gloating over them. I know Corey and I say this a lot, or she says this a lot when we have discussions. You know, we have personal discussions about people that have fallen sometimes, and we do not rejoice over it. Rather, Corey often says, you know, that could be anybody. You know, you think so-and-so's faithful, you think yourself to be faithful, it could happen to you. And so you have to watch yourself. When it comes to even a spouse being unfaithful to another, you might think to yourself, that never happened to me. You know, I love my wife, or I love my husband. Never happened to me. And we could be very quick to pile scorn on someone. It's not to say we shouldn't try to correct it, but we should always look at the failures of others as a mirror and reflect on ourselves when we do that. Philistia did not do that. Any comments or questions at this point? Yes, ma'am.
And it's with that thinking, when we talk about that, about, knowing that that can happen, with that mindset, you do need to talk to people that, like are in error, but in this instance, talk about another country, going to talk to them in love and kindness.
Right. Right. If you love someone, you ought to go to them in love, which you can't do if you're gloating over their failure, can you? You can't do that. Can't pull that off. So,
these two parties, they probably hated each other,
mm-hmm,
and they still do, to the point that they're willing to kill each other.
mm-hmm,
And so if something happens to the other one, or where it comes from, the other side will rejoice
mm-hmm.
that it's happening to them.
Yep.
They deserve it for whatever reason.
Absolutely.
And that continues on today.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We've seen children put to death, and then the other side gloats over it. It's wicked. Men can be ugly, very ugly.
We have to remember too, the way you do that, the way we use failures as a mirror, the way that we don't gloat, is when we have a focus on the soul rather than the human being.
Amen. Yeah.
And that's really what we're talking about here. It's impossible. As good a person as you can be, as good a heart as you have, if somebody has wronged you and then they fall right on their face, it's impossible for you as a human to look at another human and not feel some kind of joy with that. It's not possible. It's how we're wired as human beings, as flawed human beings. But the way we do it is what the gift that God has given us is that everybody is an individual soul. Everyone, that soul is made in the image of God. That's what we're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
We're not interested in the human being. We're not interested in the failures of the human being, the successes of the human being. We're interested in that soul and the success of that soul. It changes perspective really big. You devalue these things in humanity that the world holds up. They're so important. That gets people at each other's throats constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And you place the value where God wants you to place it, and all of a sudden, it's a very peaceful life.
Right.
When you have that focus, it's very difficult, but it's a very peaceful life.
Grudges are very heavy, and hatred is very heavy. One of the things I think of when I think of gloating over others' failures is the expression "I told you so." You know that how good it feels to say "I told you so" after you told somebody something and they don't believe you, they go against you, and then they find out you were right. That's a very human feeling. It's not one we should cherish. We should, especially when someone's soul is concerned, ought to take it seriously. So don't gloat over others' failures. Use the failures of others as a mirror. Don't be smug, be sober, because recognize that you will fail, can fail, might fail the same way. Recognize you have that same ability to fail. Recognize that you are redeemed by the same person that brought you out of the consequences of that failure. Be humble, and right or wrong, it's not a sporting event. It's a call to humility, to be humble when we see others fail. One more thing, God's people are His children. And so we have application, even more application today. Matthew chapter 5, how much time? Matthew chapter 5 and verse 48. We are told to be perfect like our Father in heaven. It's not an absolute perfectness. It's not a sinlessly perfectness that we're talking about. We are striving for that. We're striving for completion like our Father, like our God is. We're told to be more perfect like Him. Leviticus 6 and verse 36. They were told to be merciful like who? Like their Father is merciful. Ephesians 5, 1 through 2. Be followers of Him. Love others like Him. 1 John 4, 11. 1 Peter 1, 15 through 16. Be holy like Him. Set apart from all others like Him, like your Father. Luke 6 and verses 35 through 36. Love your enemies. Love those who oppose you. Our Father loves those even though they oppose Him, even though they are sinners, are very, very content to stay in their sin. God still loves them. What does that say? What does that say for us? We're mandated to love our neighbors, right? So when they fail, it's another soul. How do we respond? We gloat over it, or we take joy in it? Which of these mandates is compatible with gloating over the justice or the punishment of others? None of them, right? Yes, sir.
We can rejoice over the justice that's been meted out.
Absolutely.
And that's fine. I've told people that I would be willing to eliminate 4 heads of state if I was given that capacity to do so. And I would do it. I wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Justice is necessary.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about next with Moab. There needs to be a balance of our love of justice. We need to have both a love of justice and a love for compassion. Have that compassionate attitude toward others. Any other comments or questions before we go to Moab?
It reminds me of Christ overturning the tables in the temple. I mean, he's demonstrating, he's putting out some justice there.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't in a loving mood,
Right.
but it was just what he was doing. It's interesting, there's a righteousness to it, but you have to be careful.
Right. Our attitudes need to be right in that meting out of justice. So we turn to Moab in chapters 15 and 16. I wonder if I could get somebody to read 15, please. And then if we could get somebody else to read 16. It's 9 verses, I believe, in 15 and 14 verses in 16. So what's that? Yeah, Isaiah 15, yes. That's all right.
because in the night Ar of Moab was laid waste and destroyed, because in the night Ker of Moab is laid waste and destroyed. He has gone up to the temple and Dibon, to the high places to weep. Moab will wail over Nebo and over Medeba. On all their heads will be baldness, and every beard cut off. In their streets they will clothe themselves with sackcloth. On the tops of their houses and in their streets everyone will wail, weeping bitterly. Heshbon and Eliali,
Ollie oxen free.
their voice shall be heard as far as Jahaz. Therefore the armed soldiers of Moab will cry out. His life will be burdensome to him. My heart will cry out for Moab. His fugitives shall flee to Zoar like a 3-year-old heifer. For by the ascent of Luhith they will go up with weeping. For in the way of Horonaim they will raise up a cry of destruction. For the waters of Nimrin will be desolate, for the green grass has withered away. The grass fails, there is nothing green. Therefore the abundance they have gained. And what they have laid up, they will carry away to the foot of the willows. For the cry has gone all around the borders of Moab. It's wailing to Eglah, and it's wailing to Beer Elim. For the waters of Diamond will be full of blood, because I will bring more upon Diamond, lions upon him who escaped from Moab, and on the remnant of the land.
All right. Thank you, sir. So I'll go ahead and get 16 here. Send ye the lamb to the ruler of the land from Selah to the wilderness, under the mount of the daughter of Zion. For it shall be that as a wandering bird cast out of the nest, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon. Take counsel, execute judgment. Make thy shadow as the night in the midst of the noonday. Hide the outcasts. Bewray not him that wandereth. Let mine outcasts dwell with thee, Moab. Be thou a covert to them from the face of the spoiler. For the extortioner is at an end. The spoiler ceaseth. The oppressors are consumed out of the land. And in mercy shall the throne be established. And he shall sit upon it in truth in the tabernacle of David, judging and seeking judgment and hasting righteousness. We have heard of the pride of Moab. He is very proud, even of his haughtiness and his pride and his wrath. But his lies shall not be so. Therefore shall Moab howl for Moab. Everyone shall howl for the foundations of Kir Hareseth shall ye mourn. Surely they are stricken. For the fields of Heshbon languish, and the vine of Sibmah. The lords of the heathens hath broken down the principal plants thereof. They are come even unto Jazer. They wandered through the wilderness. Her branches are stretched out. They are gone over the sea. The glory of Moab will end. Therefore I will bewail with the weeping of Jazer, the vine of Sibmah. I will water thee with my tears, O Heshbon and Elith, for the shouting for thy summer fruits, and for thy harvest is fallen, and gladness is taken away, and joy out of the plentiful field. And in the vineyards there shall be no singing, neither shall there be shouting. The treaders shall tread out no wine in their presses. I have made their vintage shouting to cease. Wherefore my bowels shall sound like an harp for Moab, and mine inward parts for Kir Haresh. And it shall come to pass when it is seen that Moab is weary on the high place, that he shall come to his sanctuary to pray, but he shall not prevail. This is the word that the Lord hath spoken concerning Moab since that time. But now the Lord hath spoken, saying, within 3 years, as the years of an hireling, and the glory of Moab shall be contemned. With all that great multitude, and the remnant shall be very small and feeble. Doesn't sound like God's gloating or taking joy in the judgment of Moab, does it? He's weeping with them, weeping over them. Moab is this area here east of the Dead Sea. Some history. They're the descendants of Lot. Often, as we read throughout the Old Testament, we're in conflict with Israel. recall, I believe it was them, no, it was Edom that would not let them pass through their land when they're wandering through the wilderness. But Edom would be south of that. They're known for their pride, as we've just read, their idolatry, their alliances with pagan nations, and they were destroyed. They were invaded and destroyed with very little remnant in between 715 and 701 BC. So we just talked about Philistia, who took joy in God's justice on others, wouldn't so much be with themselves. Now we have God and his compassion in judgment. How it does him no pleasure to condemn man. It does him no pleasure. Right? It shouldn't do us any pleasure. So God's justice and compassion, both of them coexist. You can't say that God would not punish one in hell because that would make him an unloving God. Can't say that because God's justice and his compassion coexist. It would be unjust of God to allow man to let me rephrase that. It's unjust of God to force man to do what he wants, to create him and to force him to be in obedience to him. It is a just God that allows free will, because there is free will. Man can choose to do good, or he can choose to do evil. And so God's justice must exist. God's justice exists. God's compassion exists. So we ought to reflect his passion, his compassionate heart toward the lost and erring. Recognize pride, as Moab would recognize, is a spiritual flaw that invites destruction, and we ought to have our balance, our attitude ought to be balanced, rather, towards justice and mercy. Well, actually, I have 3 more pages of Moab. Let's do Moab next week. But I wanted to tie those together. Does everybody see how those tied logically together? Right? Any comments or questions?
God's justice and compassion. Today, people get, to us as Christians, who are reading the Bible and trying to do any obedience and understand that justice and compassion come from the Word of God and His authority.
Mm-hmm.
Today, what we do see from a lot of non-believers, or even just people that don't really know God, know the mind of God, by reading His Word, they get very skewed and they add emotion to the just and compassion, and they forget that God, the Creator, has authority, and that we should be doing that, and all of that should be coming. All the compassion and just, it comes from a place of the ultimate authority, and it's not fair. There's no flaws in that. There's no compassion that is unjust.
It all comes from the Lord of hosts, and that attitude is what gets you to start being accepting of bad behavior. Saying you have to accept this person because that's more loving. When it's contrary to God's word. Yes, sir.
It's interesting as you mentioned that they were relying on having relationships with other nations.
Mm-hmm.
They knew they couldn't stand on their own.
Right.
Shaking their fist at God.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I thank you all for your attention this evening. We'll look more at Moab next week.